going to hear from an advocate and a biophysic scholar. Curious to know what that is. She's also a fertility lawyer at the Fertility Law Center. She's going to be dealing with the topic, legal procedure in surrogacy. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Ayieta Lumbasyo. My only question is, what is bioethicist? What's that thing? Bioethicist. Google is my friend, but I'm sure you can tell me, at least today.
Thank you so much. The last speaker has mentioned so many things. Actually, the last two speakers have mentioned things that I am literally privy to and privy to. Dr. Jackie, I have done laparoscopic surgery, both, and also open myomectomy just a few weeks ago. So I know what you're talking about, both of you. Dr. Jackie said that we were meant to procreate and fill the world. And please put in my slide. I just have a question before we even decide to procreate and fill the world. Just like this. Bado inaendelea. So kama bado inaendelea kuwekwa, I must say that I am very shy. I am seriously shy. Number one. Number two, sorry, I did not observe protocol. Honorable Millie, Honorable Pasaris, Cecilia, my friend, all doctors, my seniors, my juniors, and everybody, good evening. Good evening. And I'm also happy that Honorable Millie has joined us, because one of the things that I'm going to mention is a bill that she has proposed in Parliament that is literally dealing with all this, an assisted reproductive technology bill that is dealing with all this provision of assisted reproductive treatment, therapy, so we are covered legally, hopefully soon, hopefully sooner than later, because it has been introduced since 2014. It keeps changing, mutating, and I hope we will eventually find something. Please remove my picture. I look much better now. Next, okay. So I wanted to ask: do we really have a right to reproduce? Dr. Njagi said it is God-given. But do we really have a right to reproduce? Or do we have a right to procreate? And what is the difference between those two? And once we understand the difference, then if we say we have a right, what are the corresponding duties? Because there are no rights without duties. We know that. Also, is infertility a health or a social issue? I'm glad Dr. Jackie mentioned that there's a lot of mental health in infertility. Is that a health issue or is it a social issue? We know women who've been left by their husbands because they cannot give birth. And most importantly, if it is a social issue, should we legislate on it? If it's a health issue, are we going to legislate on matters to do with reproduction and procreation? Because essentially these are bedroom issues. So those are just my questions, food for thought. I've been asked just to talk about gestational surrogacy. So all the other things, those ovulation are experts. Thank God there are experts today in the room. So gestational surrogacy, basically my baby, your womb. Next, just continue the ones that I have put. So surrogacy is an arrangement, of course, oftenly supported by an agreement where one woman carries a pregnancy for another with the intention of handing this child to the other woman once the child has been born. Dr. Murage mentioned some of the causes of infertility, and some of them were things like a person born without a uterus, or having a uterus that is not shaped well to be able to carry a pregnancy. Dr. Njagi mentioned about endometriosis. Sometimes maybe you're so affected that it cannot be treated, so you essentially need another woman to carry for you. Age is a factor. Some women, miaka inaenda kama hawajamaliza kuzaa, kama mimi bado sijazaa, miaka inaenda and you cannot be able to successfully or just because of your age, maybe not be able to carry a pregnancy. So you may require another woman to come in to carry the pregnancy for you on your behalf, and then once that has been done, you hand over the baby. Of course, it's a third-party treatment option because you're having 3 people here. You're having a totally different, a stranger into the mix, into this bedroom mix to carry for you a baby. So it's a third-party reproduction option, and with all third parties, consent. Mawakili tunasema consent is very, very important. Anybody can sue you if you put a pregnancy in me that I have not accepted. You are violate, so I can sue you. So we have 2 types of surrogacy. There's the traditional surrogacy, and there's the gestational surrogacy. Traditional, next slide please. Traditional surrogacy. Okay. So before we go to the types of surrogacy, what are the key requirements in Kenya at the moment for surrogacy? There has to be a medical clearance for surrogacy. Hatujafika first world countries where, as you can see, I have a hot figure where I do not want to spoil my figure so somebody carries for me. We've not figured there. So you must have a medical clearance for surrogacy. One of those issues that the 2 doctors who've spoken before me have mentioned. There has to be a genetic link to one of the intended parents. This is important. The ideal situation is you get your own eggs. There was a part, somebody was supposed to speak about IVF before me. That would have wrapped up a lot of things, but I'm just going to try and see how this comes. So you get the eggs from the woman, you get the sperm from the man, the partners, the parties, and then create the embryo transfer. That is the best ideal situation. The next ideal situation is where there's either an egg donor or a sperm donor, but one of the parties is genetically linked to the child, and then there has to be a written surrogacy arrangement agreement in Kenya. It is important to note that the agreement is not enforceable per se. It is persuasive to show the intention behind the process and to persuade any other authority, be it the embassy, the court, or wherever, to show who the legal parents are. In matters of surrogacy, there are usually a lot of issues, especially in legal parentage. You find sometimes you have the biological mother, who is in some cases the donor. You have the legal mother, who is the intended parent, and you have the birth mother, who is the gestational surrogate. So it is important to know who is who and what works where legally, so that this child does not just end up without any legal parentage. Next slide, please. So traditional surrogacy is where the woman who carries the baby is also most likely the provider of the egg. Usually this is a gentleman's agreement. Sometimes I think traditional surrogacy, the first one ilifanywa na Sarah and Abraham. I think those were the correct people. Where Abraham told Sarah told Abraham, please go take my slaves, live with her. When you bring in somebody else or you decide to use IUI or something like that, and sometimes even IVF, but the person who produces the egg is also the person who carries. It is not legally supported anywhere in the world because, as Honorable Millie will tell you, this is the biological child of the person carrying. So to take away, especially in Kenya, a biological child of somebody to give to another, it has to go through adoption. It can't be under surrogacy and all that because you just don't relinquish parental rights. Just because Ruby, my initial name is Ruby, just because Ruby can't give birth does not necessarily mean that I'll use Cecilia's body and eggs and take her baby. So it has to be very clear. This usually happens in a family setup, and it is very uncommon as it is very hard to regulate. So we go to the next one that is common. Please slide. The gestational surrogacy. Ideally, the child is not genetically related to the surrogate. This is where you have 3 people, the mother, the father, and the surrogate. So you get the eggs from wherever, the sperm from wherever, create an embryo, transfer to the surrogate. She gestates, she carries, gives birth, and gives the child to the people. So the first one was achieved in 1986, and it is sometimes called host surrogacy. And in most cases, at least one of the intended parents has to be genetically linked to the child. what I always advise people, or what has been passed down kisheria through courts, is if you're going to create a child, I'm using the word create very loosely, if you're going to create a child using an egg donor, a sperm donor, to be carried by a surrogate, this child is not genetically related to anybody. There's no links, there's no wherever. So why not just go to a children's home and adopt a child that is also just not genetically related to you? Why are we curing problems by creating more problems? That is what the code says. Next slide, please. So yeah, that is how it works. So there was, with these women who are called surrogates, there are some minimum internationally recognized standards. We know Sheria bado haijapitishwa hapa Kenya, but there are minimal recognized international standards that we are trying to adhere to. And this is what we are supporting as for the general requirements for the surrogate. They must be 25 years and above. Why 25? There was, when Dr. Murage was speaking, there was that fake something which I cannot pronounce. And then this person has to have at least one live birth. You don't want to put a woman through the pregnancy cycle when they've not done pregnancy. As women, we know, I do not have kids, but I know that pregnancy is just not, it's not a small thing. So you don't want to put a woman through pregnancy for the sake of another, and then maybe during that pregnancy, she ends up maybe perhaps losing her womb, dying, or something may happen to her, and then now she becomes the patient instead of just helping somebody else. So they must have had at least one live birth. They must be having at least one child who is at least 3 years. Apparently people breastfeed until 3 years, I'm not so sure. And then medical clearance, of course, you want to see that her womb works, other things, she's not HIV positive, and etc. Criminal clearance is very important. This is a third party caring for other people a pregnancy. And the most important thing that a lot of doctors, unfortunately, I have this issue with you, is they have to go through psychological analysis. Not everybody is capable of being a surrogate. Not every consent given is informed. If you've not told this party the risks involved, multiple pregnancy, mtu anabeba watoto wawili watatu, you've not told this party that all these things are involved, they'll be psychologically what. So that party has not given informed consent. So it is very important that the surrogate goes through psychological analysis before she enters into a gestational surrogacy arrangement, so that she has all informed consent and she's legally cleared, that she's sane and all that. Next slide, please. So before, just go mbele and then we'll come back, go again. Yeah. So this is the proposed structure of a surrogacy process in Kenya, before I even go to what the agreement entails. We start with the yellow, is it golden? The intended parent is medically cleared for surrogacy. Ruby anapatikana ya kwamba maybe she has no womb or has myomas that cannot be removed or something like that. And then there's a screening and selection process of a surrogate. I've given you the basic requirements of a surrogate. She has to meet those. Once she has met those, there's supposed to be a pre-surrogacy counseling process, especially for the surrogate, but ideally for the intended parents as well, so that when they are entering into an agreement, which is now the next thing, they have informed consent of all the risks, benefits, kila kitu. And then now you enter into a legal consult, you're given the process, the legal procedures in Kenya about surrogacy, how to register this child after giving birth, and then you draw an agreement. Then of course, that is the only time a clinical and medical process is supposed to begin, because this is third-party reproduction. You must have an agreement before you enter into third-party reproduction. And then hopefully a pregnancy is achieved, and then birth process. And then now you register the child who has been born. Don't worry about that adoption child registration, come back. So let's go back to Rudy Numa. So what does the agreement entail? Of course, identity of the parties. The facility center, the hospital where this has been carried out. This is for accountability and follow-up processes. A guardian ad litem, somebody who, in case something happens to you or the intended parents, who is going to take care of these children, because the surrogate does not have any legal or health rights towards the child at all. I'll give you an example, 2 examples actually. One, why we started with this guardian ad litem in the first place, why it was proposed. One time there was a couple that had gone through surrogacy, but they were living abroad. So when they came down to get their child 2 weeks before the child was born, the lady came before the man, and she went to SHADS. Ukitoka abroad unaenda SHADS kwanza, piga huko report. And so the surrogate went into labor earlier than expected. The lady was called, and when she was coming back to Nairobi, she got an accident and died on the road. And since nobody had contact details of the man, we could not release the child to the surrogate. The only other option, we decided that the hospital should keep the child unless the other only option was to release to a children's home. And we know how the children's home are in this country, so it's not somewhere where you want a newborn to go and start their life at. So once the man finally contacted the center that had taken them through the process, is when he was told that your child is already here, you better calm down. This helped a lot during the COVID era period, where people were locked in other countries, their children are being born, and nobody is there to receive them. All over the world, including Ukraine. UK had to give emergency passports to people who are caring for, the Ukraine people who are caring for them surrogate babies, so that they can go there and give birth. So it is very important. Of course, there has to be a compensation for time taken out in the state. It is not payment. Payment implies commercial surrogacy. There has to be a monthly upkeep, provision for intended parent to enter delivery room, give out the child at birth, the surrogate. Next slide, please. Provision for court or embassy attendance. This is important. You'll understand why this is important when it comes to registration. I have noted with a lot of concern that some doctors here who are doing surrogacy decide to do chini ya maji registration of children. This will affect them in future. So it is better, just do your medical bit, let law do its legal bit. Registration has never been a matter of a health practitioner. When I come to the center, when I go to hospital, for instance, and I am pregnant and I give birth, it only makes sense that the birth notification shows Ruby gave birth. I cannot go give birth and then you put Cecilia's name. As in, it is a slippery slope for child trafficking. Next time when I give birth, what will prevent you from putting Millie's name? And Millie gives you 2 million. She's richer than I am. Hopefully soon I'll be as rich as you. So what prevents you from doing that? Nothing can prevent you. And Honorable Millie can tell you, Kenya is recognized as it's put on 3 tier when it comes to trafficking of people and children, because it is a destination, it is a source, it is a transit, and it is a destination for trafficked children. And at the moment as I speak, a UNICEF report that was conducted in 2023, in February this year, has already said that surrogacy in Kenya is being used for trafficking of children. You find people going to give birth, putting other people's names on the birth notification, yet it's a medical paper. Why are you lying on the medical paper? If Ruby gave birth, just write Ruby. The legal process will take care of that to transfer Ruby to Cecilia, so that it is not a conducive for child trafficking. And then, of course, all this in privacy and confidentiality, and all these are some of the things that are supposed to be in the agreement. And of course, provision for parental responsibility immediately. Well, immediately, it is not immediately at birth, but immediately the surrogate gets pregnant. Next slide, please. Next. So what are the current, we say there are no laws on surrogacy at all. But what can be used at the moment? The Constitution of Kenya. Number 1, it provides for a right to form a family, and then it goes ahead, even though it's discriminative, it goes ahead to describe what a family is. It says man, woman, children. You can see there imekazia gays, imekazia lesbians, and that also goes ahead even in the Children Act, where if you're going to do adoption, gays and lesbians have also been katiziwed. And then the Children's Act provides for right of a child. Just because a child has been born through IVF or through surrogacy does not make them any less of a child. They still have all the rights of a child. and then it also provides for parental custody, parental maintenance, and other things. People say we do not have laws to transfer all this, but how do you take charge of a child that you did not give birth? The Children Act provides for sessions on how to go about it. So, umeenda mbali, rudi, mbele. So, what are the proposed laws on surrogacy? As I say, we have Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill of 2023. It provides for some of these things that I have said here. It provides for a qualification of a surrogate. At the moment, we are at 25 years. She must be a mother. There's provision for an agreement. There's provision for a genetic link, at least one party. There's provision for termination of a surrogacy arrangement agreement. How do you terminate it? When can you terminate it? There's a provision for registration of children born out of surrogacy, though myself and Honorable Millie are not really agreeing on how that goes, but it can be discussed later. Then there's provision for parties who can access surrogacy, the eligibility criteria. Not just everybody will be able to access. For instance, a woman of 60 years, is it really in the best interest of the child for her to start giving birth at the moment and through a surrogate and stuff like that? And then there's provision for registration of clinics providing this treatment. There's provision for actually NHIF. At the moment, I hear it's not going to be called NHIF. There's a new bill that has come up that is totally different. It's not going to be called NHIF, it's something totally different, but there's provision for insurance in general, both life insurance and medical insurance for the surrogate, just in case something happens to them. No agencies are allowed or to profit from surrogacy, so you are not going to profit from providing people with surrogates. That also precludes people from advertising for that service of surrogacy. It's like advertising for a kidney. Please give me a kidney, I give you 20,000 and stuff like that. And then there's no blind surrogacy. A lot of people have been duped where you do not meet who your intended parent is, you do not meet your surrogate. Kila kitu inafanywa chini ya maji. Daktari tu ndiye anajua client ni nani, surrogate ni nani, mtoto penye ametoka, nini. Surrogacy is an open thing. Why all the chini ya maji? Let's just put it on the table and do it openly so that it's acceptable everywhere. The next. So this is the current registration process of a child born out of surrogacy for those who do not do it chini ya maji. A child is born, a birth notification slip is issued. It should be issued in the surrogate's name. It should be issued in the surrogate's name. Then you file papers in court. We are hoping that the act, the bill that is coming up will make this much easier, either not necessarily filing in court or filing before, or even if it's there, it's accessible, cheap and all that, but at the moment this is what happened. Papers are filed in court either for parental custody or adoption orders. What's the difference? Parental custody orders are gotten at the children court. It's a lower court. Adoption is only done at the high court. So some people prefer going through adoption, and some people, because of the circumstances, like if you have no genetic link, then you have to adopt that child. Clearly that child is not yours. And then you're asked to proceed for DNA to establish genetic link as per the court's order. Once genetic link has been established, either from one of the parties, then you get your parental custody orders or the adoption orders, and then you proceed to the birth and death registry for birth certificate, and you enjoy raising the children. For foreigners, you proceed to embassy for passports and for more travel. One trick I've noticed that people are doing right now is when they're doing traditional surrogacy, unasema mimi nimelala na mwanaume fulani, we go to the embassy, it's just a love affair gone wrong, but I've given the father rights to go with the child and they proceed and stuff like that. That is illegal. Like, just think about it. Even just think about it for that's just illegal. So what are the ethical and legal issues in surrogacy? Please go to the next slide. At the core level, informed consent. Very key. There's afterthought and before action and after. If you get into an agreement after you started the agreement, it does not have the same rights as if you get into the agreement before you start treatment. So the surrogate has to enter into it voluntarily, the capacity has to be good. Some people, you just see them caring for their sisters, and you don't even know if they had the capacity or they were doing it voluntarily, maybe it was through coercion. confidentiality and privacy, of course eligibility, as I've said, constitution and penal code discriminates against some parties, accessibility, the recruitment process of the surrogate or the intended parent, disclosure of risks. Some people don't even tell the surrogate how many babies they are carrying. Mtu ako na mimba twins na hata hajaambiwa na beba twins, and then the compensation. Treat these girls gently. Please, next slide. At the treatment level, there's the status of embryo. Whose life is more important? Is it the surrogate's life or the child in the womb? If something happens, who do you rescue? Number of embryos transferred. We need to stop transferring 3, 4, 5 embryos. AC ng'ombe, sibanya, mbili, inatosha. And then the right to prenatal care, including disclosure of multiple pregnancy, and even a choice of fetal reduction. If the surrogate gets that she has 3, let her have a right to choose if she wants to reduce the fetuses to at least 2, what is comfortable, because it's still her body and she has autonomy over her body. Just because she's caring for somebody else does not make the autonomy, does not reduce the autonomy that she has. Right to access her medical records. Some of them are not even allowed to do that. And of course, psychological counseling and analysis. At the final level, I've talked about registration of children born out of a surrogacy. So while we are doing all this, let's consider the best interest of the child. At the end of the day, it's about the child. And then, of course, the legal parentage. We need to go into international standards because some people, like in the UK, if you've not followed the requirements and wherever, they will not register that child there. And then that child is not Kenyan because we do not give citizenship just by virtue of being born in Kenya. So this child now will become stateless. And are we just creating more problems by trying to cure problems that us adults are curing, yet creating children problems? And then cross-border reproduction, that is where these issues come a lot in, because you find we are not following laws that are in other countries, or our standards are so low that the reciprocity in other countries cannot be met. And then, of course, international minimum standards so that reciprocity is met. Others. Next. Data and reporting regulation, that is also in the bill that is coming up. We need to collect data and report everything that has happened. And then, of course, vanity, there was a debate if people should be allowed to do surrogacy for the sake of it, or if they should have a medical reason to do. That is still up to debate. Next. So these are the factors that usually affect ethical issues. Of course, the culture, religion, level of exposure and training, professional ethics, existing or non-existing laws. And I think the final slide. In closing, again, best interest of children, welfare of the child, right to knowledge of origin, and then way forward is, of course, we need legislation on reciprocity, policies and regulations, advocacy, and most important, networking and collaborating. We share ideas, we share the knowledge, we share all this. And let's not shy away from surrogacy and do it underground. It is something so open, so public. Let's put it out there so that people can just be doing it. Happy World Fertility Day.